Israel has ordered a complete siege of the Gaza Strip after announcing that the area will be cut off from food, fuel, electricity and water supplies. It comes 2 days after surprise attacks by Hamas left hundreds dead. 9 U.S. citizens are among the casualties, while more than 10 British citizens are feared dead or missing. Former diplomat and risk analyst Dr. Kingsley Makhubela joins us now on this story. Dr. Makhubela, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on tonight.
Thanks, Thabo. Really pleasure to be on your program.
A complete siege of the Gaza Strip. Is this a surprise for Hamas as much as the attacks at the weekend were a surprise for Israel?
You know, Thabo, one thing between the Israelis and Palestinians is that they understand each other and they can predict each other. Of course, Hamas should have predicted the response of Israel. What we don't know, what is on Hamas lips now, it's what's going to happen next once this siege is completed. And as we are talking, they're already pounding the Gaza Strip. What is their anticipated reaction to this? We still have to see as this conflict is unfolding.
Can there be, as others are calling, a decisive and diplomatic action that could come from the international community now, as many are calling, to avoid this erupting into a complete new Middle East war?
The problem, Thabo, is that the international community is divided. They are divided in their approach to the unfortunate loss of life of civilians from both sides. They can't take a firm decision as to how to move around this thing. You may have seen the Security Council divided on whether to issue out a statement condemning or issue out a statement that really encompasses everything, that speaks about return to the negotiation. As a result, the statement was not issued out.
Yeah.
That's indicative of the divisions within the international community that we're starting to see. But you know, it's quite common with intractable conflicts. They really keep on changing in shape. They keep on bringing new allies, and they keep on discharging other allies in the process. But the Americans, they're not making the situation much easier because they've committed to send hardware military. As we are talking, a ship carrier, the Gerald Ford, it's about to sail in the Middle East. It's an aircraft carrier with huge amount of aircrafts to try to, as they are saying, to prevent any possible diffusion of the conflict affecting other areas. So we don't know if that's going to be possible. But we've seen in the last 2 hours or an hour or so, the Israeli Defense Force announced that they've attacked 3 positions of Hezbollah in Lebanon. So the conflict is definitely changing now. The escalation is getting out of control.
Yeah, so exactly that. There are 2 scenarios, 2 outcomes. I hear one expert saying that could emanate from this. One is the immediate danger from within Israel. So it's the Gaza Strip now that has been affected, but others have been saying with the recent racial conflicts that we have been seeing, it's highly likely that it will even spread to the West Bank, and we're going to see more of those conflicts depending on how the politicians are responding to this, beginning to happen internally within Israel. But then we're also going to see outside, what you're pointing to, Lebanon and probably other international players coming on board.
The conflict is absolutely getting out of hand. In the last few minutes, there have been 7 Palestinians who were killed in the occupied West Bank, in Ramallah. And you can see there the Palestinian Authority, they are in paralysis. This way, people were demonstrating in support of what's going on in the Gaza Strip. So the conflict is definitely changing. Every minute is changing. And that's where the problem is. What we are lacking now, it's the Yasser Arafat Yitzhak Rabin moment, the great leadership that would intervene to really calm the situation. It's not there. That's what we are seeing on the ground.
How do we form deeper perspectives here? Because even with us here in South Africa, I tried to hold a conversation yesterday on this. We are divided on 2 sides. Others are saying it's a response to years of brutality of the Israeli apartheid regime. Others are saying it's acts of terrorism. How do you strike a balance where you stand with both Israel and stand with Palestine on this issue?
Thabo, there's no justification for really a massacre of ordinary civilians. I think there should be. We all know that there's a conflict between Israeli Defense Force and Hamas. Civilians should be respected in the process. There's no justification really to attack civilians and kill innocent people. In the same token, Israel has no responsibility really to kill ordinary civilians. So civilians should be protected. I think Secretary General came up with a statement about 30 minutes ago, really emphasizing this point of respecting civilian lives and protecting them in the conflict. But some analysts are starting to look into the words that were used when condemning Hamas and when really raising concerns about Israel pounding the civilian infrastructure and killing ordinary people. I think there's no justification for killing of ordinary people. For whatever reason, that can't be justified.
The Palestinian fragile fiscal situation and, of course, the funding shortages that they are faced with, would that make, I wouldn't say the negotiation, but would that make this particular conflict shorter, would cut it shorter?
Well, you know, one thing in conflict resolution, sometimes it's said, Thabo, that the other way of ending conflict is to getting one side in the conflict defeated. But we're unlikely to see this. This conflict has been going on since 1948 between the Palestinians and the Israelis. So there won't be any victor in the process. That's why the strategy of the Israelis, it seems now, is to pound the Gaza Strip with a lot of airstrikes and so on. I don't know if they would commit ground forces to try to finish the operation, but they know once they commit ground forces, they may be engaged in some form of a guerrilla warfare, and the Hamas will have much more advantage in terms of inflicting heavy casualties on the Israeli Defense Force. Politically, Prime Minister Netanyahu is not willing to take that, given the lapses that have happened and the killings that have happened. He would not want to see more Israelis being killed during this combat. And I don't foresee the ground forces, but the pounding and using precise and precision missiles would continue.
Yeah.
Gallant, the defense minister, has made it quite clear. And the language that is being used sometimes by the Israelis is quite concerning. To hear Yoav Gallant saying that the Israelis are human animals, the Palestinians, I beg your pardon, are human, are animals human? I mean, how do you describe human beings in this sense? It means that you have no sense of respect for human life once you start describing them in that manner. And these are issues that are escalating the tension on both sides. Finding a possible solution is going to be a challenge. The European Unions are trying to convene a meeting to see how to really help. We don't know what's going to happen.
So speaking of Prime Minister Netanyahu and his statements, I heard the IDF threading carefully earlier on in an interview around the statements that he made. He said those who are in the Gaza Strip must leave their homes, right? And others are saying, well, they are actually jammed in. When you say 2 million people must leave their home at densely populated area, where exactly do they go when they are surrounded by Israeli soldiers all around? And the IDF saying, well, we are not necessarily sticking to that tactic. Those are his comments as the Prime Minister. Ours is a commitment to making sure that, of course, we defend Israel, but we follow the protocols of ensuring that we do not target the civilians.
They are treading very carefully because there's a possibility of war crime investigation coming out of this thing. And I think the IDF, they're not willing to compromise their integrity as a military force and really coming up with regular statements that may really compromise them. But behavior on the ground is totally different. What the IDF is doing is pounding every civilian infrastructure, which is against the rules of conduct in any conflict. So it's a huge problem. You're going to get those conflicting messages. I heard also Al-Qassam, the brigade of the military wing of Hamas saying that they're going to execute every individual each time there's an attack. And Israel said, you can carry on, we're going to carry on with our bombardment. It's unlikely. The Israelis are quite careful about human life, particularly of Israelis, to carry on with that kind of a behavior. So we'll see as this conflict unfolds what kind of intervention is required. That's why I'm saying the absence of the Arafat, Yitzhak Rabin moment is what we are missing during this conflict now.
Yeah. Also on that, I mean, the fact that you've got the jihadists that's claiming to have 30 captives, and you've got Hamas that's claiming to have 100 captives, or 180, that possibly could be spread out around the Gaza Strip, makes it even more difficult, I suppose, for Israel, who care about the lives of their citizens, to just mow down everything, because you never know where they are.
You know, the Hamas has built a lot of tunnels within the Gaza Strip, and Israel knows about that. Probably where they are kept very safe, because I think Hamas wants to use them as human shield and also use them as bargaining chips against Israel. I think the Israelis know that, but this disputants, they really understand each other, and they understand and they can project the reaction of each other. But what I'm saying also, Thabo, is that we need to see what was Hamas' strategic aim to really do this attack. Didn't they anticipate that kind of retaliation? Of course they did. What we don't know is what is on their sleeves. What cards do they have on their sleeves now?
Others saying Israel could win the battle, but certainly lose the war in this instance, especially around the politics of the world. The current administration, which really sought to exert its force to say we can get Hamas in order, was actually caught napping. The number of people who were killed this past weekend is the highest ever that they've seen in the conflict so far, which says that attempt that they tried to do failed.
You know, I think after, when the situation is settled to a certain extent, you're going to find the heads will be rolling within the domestic intelligence, Shin Bet and Mossad, as to what happened, why couldn't they detect this kind of massive plan. And of course, there's a talk now about the intelligence lapses, but for the Israelis, this is not time to talk about that. They are in the state of war. I think the Knesset sometimes today will be confirming the state of war. They will vote on that and agree that they give the Prime Minister that, because then it gives the Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense extraordinary powers to conduct this war without consulting the Knesset. So that's what we are likely to see unfolding. So I don't really think for now, if you listen to the rhetoric coming from the Israelis and from Hamas, there's no willingness really to try to de-escalate the conflict. Even though there are people who are speaking about de-escalations of this conflict, the Russians are talking the same language, and the Chinese. But the question, Thabo, again, is the timing of this attack. And the question is, why did Hamas do this? And this is going to be a subject of a really serious analysis moving forward. They may have exploited the differences in the international situation, particularly between the Chinese and the Russian on one hand, and the Americans, the Europeans on the other hand, that this is the time for them to carry out this kind of operation, knowing that the world is not unified and will not come with a unified response, and there won't be any Security Council resolution. Because under normal circumstances, the Security Council should have by now issue out a serious a resolution, not even a statement, a resolution with clear actionable activities. But they're unlikely to do that because of those differences within the Security Council.
Yeah, and if we are to look at this, I mean, although Israel would want to blame Iran for this, but certainly the attack has clearly shocked the society, so much so that Prime Minister Netanyahu's career, political career, could certainly be coming to an end because of this, at least.
Absolutely. I mean, the blaming of Iran, I saw Blinken issuing out a statement that there's no evidence that Iran has been involved in planning. But what we all know, and it's not a secret, Iran supports the Palestinian cause. So are other Muslim countries that are really supporting the Palestinian cause. And some of them are supporting what Hamas has done now. So there's no secret about that. But the Prime Minister's political career is on the line. There will be a lot of questions once the dust has settled. I don't think the Israelis are going to now start the blame game in the midst of a conflict going on. They would wait until the dust is settled and they would want answers. And these answers are going to create some political fallout, I must say.
Well, a lot of questions being asked now about why the international efforts, or at least peace efforts, have failed in the past, and why many around the world no longer see the United Nations as the answer.
Thabo, the world has really evolved. There's been a political shift to the right. If you look at the Democrats in the United States, they've moved to the right of their opponent. You're seeing that kind of behavior shifting to the right, and in Israel itself, parties like the Labour Party basically disappeared, and much more parties that are much more to the right, that are advocating for that Israel should take over the entire Palestine, and the two-state solution is not viable. So you're hearing those voices coming up within Israel, but they're coming up from the far right within Israel. Likud has moved a bit to the far right also. So the center politics within the right and the left, center-right in Israel is disappearing. So is in the United States. I mean, you'll be surprised to hear how timid are the Republicans compared to the Democrats, who are supposed to be occupying the center-left in the U.S. political scenario. So these things are changing, same as in the United Kingdom. I mean, the SPD in Germany, traditionally it's the center-left within the German political setup, but they've moved much more to the right of the CDU. So you're seeing these changes that are really complicating the resolution of the problem, and so on.
So I had one, I think, ambassador to Palestine, South African ambassador to Palestine, saying that the world had completely forgotten or even ignored the conflict in Israel and Palestine when the Palestinians were being killed. It's only now that Israelis have been killed that is now come back to the forefront. And after this, it's again going to go to the back burner, and the world is just going to move on and forget about this.
But all that depends on the United States. The United States will veto any resolution that either condemns Israel. The United States holds the key to persuade Israel in terms of the peaceful negotiation. Bill Clinton tried that. That's why we had the Yitzhak Rabin and Arafat that really gave hope in terms of the resolution of the conflict. But we don't see any leadership provided on the global stage now. And of course, the conflict that are emerging around the world are really concerning, because in Europe you have Russia and Ukraine. Now you have this one in the Middle East. In Africa, all the conflicts are forgotten. In Asia, the Myanmar conflict and what's going on there is forgotten. Now the focus would even move from Ukraine to Israel, because the Israeli issue it's very important for the U.S. election. Now, building up to the election, that's going to become a serious election tools within the American political system, unfortunately.
Dr. Kingsley Makhubela, I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for your analysis tonight.
My pleasure.